Welcome to the Total Soccer Show and our latest foray into the listener questions mailbag. On this episode, we're proposing World Cup player trades. We're putting Southampton in Serie A, sure. We're localising the Club World Cup and much, much more. My name's Ryan Bailey. Joining me today, it's your friend, it's my friend, the Taylor Rocco. Hello, Taylor.
Hello, Ryan Bailey. It's lovely to see you. I enjoyed our recap of all of the different methods of transportation you've taken in the last 24 hours to be where you are. Where there is internet that will work, we'll find out.
Remains to be seen during this episode, Taylor. But yes, I'm back on the mainland of the United Kingdom, having travelled planes, trains, and automobiles. John Candy made it much funnier than it was in real life. I'll tell you that.
At what point, so you did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different methods of conveyance. At what point were you annoyed, and was it at number 1?
Yes, okay, you're going to make me list them now. Okay, so to get off of Wickerman Island, where I was staying...
Cannibalism Island.
Yeah, goodness me. A bike, a small electric bus, a small boat to get between islands, a big ferry to get to the mainland, a coach, and then a car, a rental car. It was a full day of travel to travel across a very small country, basically.
And did you have to actually go through that process, Ryan, or was there like a kind of Wes Anderson style montage, like a twee montage that could speed the whole thing up?
Yeah, South Park told me that things go quicker with the montage. Or was that World Police? It was Team America World Police. Sorry, yeah.
It was indeed. I do, Graham, to your point, I picture Ryan... It's a montage hard cut each time of Ryan sipping tea on each different conveyance. So it's him riding a bike while sipping tea with like some sort of cravat on, and then it's him on the bus sipping tea all the way through. It's a very formal montage. Yeah.
They had to cut the funicular railway at the end, but they filmed it. They can use it later.
Yeah. You know the Bill Murray cameo's coming, you just don't know when. Graham Rutland's here. Hello, Graham.
Hello, Ryan. Yes, I'm relieved that you are back on Plague Island, mainland off Cannibalism Island. It's good to have you back.
Thanks. Appreciate it. It's very warm and there's no air conditioning, Graham. It's a struggle that I know you...
Don't talk about it, though. The Americans will get annoyed. Yeah. They'll get annoyed at this.
Speaking of one, Joe Lowry's here. Hello, Joe.
It's 75 degrees.
I'm roasting. It's good to be here, guys. Ryan, this whole time I thought you were on Love Island. That's where I thought you were, and that's why you couldn't show yourself. Because, I don't know, spoilers or whatever. A hot new Ryan Bailey is entered, whatever they say.
Oh, wow. So, Joe, are you a Love Island viewer? Let me ask you that.
No, I'm not. I'm not a Love Island viewer.
Do you aspire to be one?
Yes. I do not, no. I do like me some reality TV, but it's not high on my list necessarily.
Yeah. The closest I've come to watching it is watching 30 Rock, where I believe they had Intercourse Island. That's the only island show I'm familiar with, unfortunately.
I mean, that is Temptation Island, right? Like Montoya, por favor. Yeah. They basically made that show.
Ryan, I believe you're alluding to MILF Island. Thank you very much. That's what they have on 30 Rock.
Have I just made up an island?
Mine sounds more fun. Yours does sound more fun than Plague Island and Cannibalism Island. Yeah, I think I'll take yours.
Right, let's get this back on the rails. Patreon.com/Total Soccer Show is where you'll find our bonus content, bonus video content, bonus episodes, and access to our Discord server. All the cool kids are hanging out there. Come chat with us in there. Patreon.com/Total Soccer Show. The best way to support this here endeavour. Thank you to everybody who does so already. And look at us all on the YouTube. Go find us on the YouTube. Like and subscribe. Graham's voguing. It's his trademark move on the YouTube. Join us there, please, and thank you. All right, we have a bustling mailbag to get through. We're going to start off with a message that dropped in our Discord from Texas Husia. There it is. Would the Club World Cup have been better off hosting in a specific part or location of the United States instead of spreading the tournament out over the entirety of this large nation? If you had it in the Northeast, says Texas Husia, would that help with the audience, attendance, and ease of travel? Would FIFA ever go for this kind of thing? And would you be in favour of something like this for future US-hosted soccer events? Taylor, it's a very interesting concept. I mean, the Northeast has the infrastructure to host a whole tournament in theory, for example. I mean, even the Republic of Arizona could really punish the Europeans with its plus 60 degree heat every day.
Yes, let's do that.
That would be so fun. I would enjoy that immensely. I think this would be a really interesting experiment. I agree that I don't think FIFA would ever go for it because they want the quote-unquote marquee cities, I think, to be involved, and they want to be able to have all the different picturesque shots to sort of convey how big time this competition would be. But I do think that if you localized it in the Northeast, for example, you are going to annoy a lot of the country, and I think you will get maybe less attendance domestically. At the same time, if you have the built-in audience of people coming to support their club or their country, whichever it might be, for whichever competition FIFA would want to try this with, like that kind of makes up for it, and then you have everybody in a more like contained environment where there is easier modes of transportation. You don't have to rely on airfare quite as much. It would be a grueling 5-hour drive, which I know for many English people is just completely insane to contemplate.
That's only one mode of transport, though. To be fair,
that's true. Not the 6 that you went for. It would be fun if you had to do all of those things to get from Philly to New York, Ryan. But I think it would be really cool because you could have that kind of that smaller vibe without going full Qatar and having every single stadium within 4 minutes of each other. So I would be down for the experiment, even if I think it would annoy a lot of people almost instantaneously.
Yeah, I mean, this summer is meant to be East Coast, West Coast, right, between the two tournaments. I know it's not quite working out that way because you have, I'm just looking at the map here, so you have Club World Cup games being played in LA and Seattle, and you've got Gold Cup games being played in St. Louis and Minnesota. But Gold Cup is largely being played in the West, and Club World Cup is largely being played in the East. I remember the Athletic reporting around that a year ago, and that was the plan. So in practice, that maybe hasn't quite happened. And obviously, you're still talking about huge areas like East Coast, West Coast, or half a continent. But they have tried that this summer. I just think, Ryan, when you say the Northeast has the infrastructure to host a 48-team World Cup, which is kind of what we're talking about here. That is 12 stadiums. The next year's going to be 12 stadiums, and there's also there's rules like the final and semi-finals. I think it has to be over 80,000. Every stadium has to have a 40,000 capacity. So the closest that I think could do it in terms of a state is California. They've got 11 stadiums over. I'm just looking here, over 40,000, but at least 4 of those are baseball venues. So. Yeah, difficult. I agree with Taylor. If you could pull it off, it'd be great for transport purposes. And when I went to the Euros last summer in Germany, I thought one of the best things about that tournament, I'd never been to a major tournament before, but it was the sense of place. So you would get on the trains and there'd be fans from other teams, and it just felt like the tournament was omnipresent. And I think the US is so big that it's always going to be difficult to achieve that. I just don't see in practice an area of the country that's able to host a 48-team World Cup on its own.
Grim, how was the actual transport in Germany? Refresh my memory. Were there, delays? Were there
Yes.
challenges there with the trains? Because my beef here with this concept working in the U.S., one of them, I have another one that I'll get to shortly, is that we don't have the public transportation infrastructure to make this work, and roads will be a true nightmare. I think an unsustainably terrible nightmare. So anyway, what was it like in Germany?
It was terrible. Was it DFB, Ryan, as our resident German expert?
For the trains, yeah.
I don't think I had a single train come on time. But I mean, the trains were large enough and they were there to have the capacity. So they just didn't arrive in time.
And that's a country with a legit public transportation infrastructure. Here in the U.S., we are not that, and even in a couple of these major cities that do have that. I don't think they can handle this happening all the time. I think transportation-wise, this would actually be a disaster. The other challenge here that I can think of is you're playing all these games in the same time zone, which means you're playing 9 a.m. games, like MLS is back Orlando style, in all of these markets because you have to have slots available for TV, which means if you're following the current Club World Cup model of 4 games a day, which is what I would assume we will get next summer as well, you're playing a game local time at 9 a.m. And I don't know that that's a huge draw, but maybe I'm wrong about that. We'll see. That's what the first Club World Cup game slot has kicked off for me all the time, and it's so difficult to get enough of that across the board. I think you run into real time constraints here. Maybe that's not as big of an issue, but having a 9 a.m. local kickoff doesn't feel great either.
I can't do that for NFL all the time, though, Joe?
What's that?
Don't you do that for NFL games on the reg?
Yeah, all I know is that when they do that for soccer games, everybody complains about it. So whether or not that's actually a real issue, I don't really know, but it certainly seems like an issue given the amount of hubbub that comes around that stuff.
I can't remember. Do they try to structure kickoff times to suit the nations that are playing? If England is playing,
mix.
It is.
Okay. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. They tend to straddle it between a European friendly time zone, kickoff time, and then whatever's friendly for the host nation. So,
because you could do noon, 3, 6, and then like 9. But even there, Joe, to your point, noon right now is still going to be pretty blazing hot in a lot of places, and it would be kind of frustrating. And I'm not sure anybody wants to be playing soccer until midnight, even if that would also be fun.
Yeah, this just seems impractical to me. Like, the time zone constraints are really difficult here because you don't have that uniformity across the U.S. I think the transportation infrastructure would be a real challenge, and I'm not really sure that we're solving for much with this scenario. I don't know that we're like really changing a lot for the better here. I still think even this summer, if you think about it, that Mamelodi Sundowns game in Orlando, you could play that game anywhere on the continent probably, and it draws the same crowd, more or less. So I think I can see some flaws in the current setup, but I don't think we're moving the ball down the field all that much here.
I think a key differentiator for me would be that it would have to be a tournament where you can almost guarantee there's going to be built-in attendance, and there really just hasn't been that with the Club World Cup. But like if you tried it with a World Cup, even an expanded World Cup format, I do wonder if you would get more interest in some of those smaller nations just because you're in a tighter like confinement area. I don't know why I'm making this into like a walled off zone, but like maybe you would then get more casual interest in games because like, hey, what else are you gonna do? And it's a World Cup, and maybe that could extend to a Club World Cup if you have like supporters in a smaller area. Maybe they're more likely to go to other games. But there's a lot of maybes and conditionals in that one.
I'll be really interested. Hopefully, I and all of us will experience like the World Cup firsthand next year in the US. But I'll be really interested to see if, like when I went to Germany, and as I say, that's my only experience. I'm not exaggerating. Everywhere you went, whether it was a train station, a shopping centre, there were fans of different countries, and I'm really interested to see with the World Cup in the US whether the US is just so large that it swallows the whole thing, or whether there is still that sort of omnipresent quality.
Yeah. You're going to be really disappointed when that Scottish travel ban kicks in early next summer, Graham, so apologies.
It's about time they banned us. Well, to be fair, we've been banned from World Cup since 1998, so I don't think much will change there.
Banned, yeah, that's what it was. Small correction on my part. DFB, it's Deutsche Bahn, DB who do the trains.
DB.
DFB, they very much organise the soccer in Germany instead of the trains. But apparently one of them doing a better job than the other, according to Graham Rudman. There we go. Texas Husia, thank you very much indeed for your question. We go now to Andrew, who's also filed this one through the Discord. Here we go. Instead of a one-time switch rule, what if FIFA allowed a one-time trade rule per World Cup cycle? Here we go. If that were the case, and assuming both federations would have to agree to the deal, who would each of the TSS guys trade for to improve their national teams, and who would they give up? Joe wants to go first. Look at him cracking his knuckles. Here we go.
This one's so good, Andrew. This is maybe one of my favorite questions that we've ever had, and I wish I had infinite time to think about it because I'm sure there are so many good answers to these questions. The way I thought about this, fellas, was there's a lot of things that could improve the U.S. So instead of starting with what the U.S. needs, I started with what could they offer another nation. So that's why I thought about this. What is the deepest part of the squad? Who are the players that could be traded
We'll take
without...
anything that you can give us.
Yeah, I mean...
it's the starting point here.
It's pretty much where I landed here. I didn't really look for central midfielders or strikers, but I looked for a lot of players. Here are my players that I think are on the trading block. I have Ricardo Pepi, because I'm a Flora Balogun guy. Come on, we all know this. And I think Pepi has real value in these trades. Johnny Cardoso, because when the first choice US is here, he's not a starting player. And he's now an Atletico Madrid player. Or not officially, but he is. Yunus Musa is on the list. High potential, rising central midfielder. Rising, maybe not so much. And then Joe Scally, because he's a Bundesliga starter for a decent team, and the US don't really need him. So I started with... yeah, go ahead, Graham.
and Joe hates him.
Oh, yeah, there's a little bit of that. I started with
Joe to hate a Joe, but it's happened here.
Yeah, it's tough. You know, for me, it was when Graham turned on Graham Potter that I realized I could be free.
Open the door.
I started with Pepi. So what national team could use a striker? I thought about Poland with Robert Lewandowski on strike right now. I thought about some other nations. Where I landed is with the Netherlands, and I need you guys to back me up here. And tell me whether these are good or bad, right? I need some other perspectives here. Memphis Depay started for the Netherlands in both of their World Cup qualifiers in June. Memphis Depay is over 30. He's not a natural number 9 really either at this stage. He's playing in Brazil. He's definitely on the downward trajectory at this stage of his career. I'm wondering if we can do a Ricardo Pepi for Stefan de Vrij swap.
Ooh.
Thoughts, feelings. I have more, but this is my first one. Thoughts, feelings. I feel good about this one. I'm not going to lie. Graham, how do I feel?
Yeah, in that he would be a starter for the US, and Ricardo Pepi. I mean, he could be a starter, but Balogun, not much in it there. So yeah, I think he could do better though. There's surely some sexier players that you could take from the Dutch that would.
How about we go the other way, just to annoy Joe, but also kind of sincerely? How about we do Balogun for Luke de Jong, and we do that swap, and then we just get the same PSV issue for Ricardo Pepi, but you have Luke de Jong out of him, and then maybe
he's everywhere.
What's gonna happen.
He keeps following me.
You have overlooked the striker for striker option, the Pepi for Giz Hornkamp.
Right,
option.
My bad. Yep.
Yeah.
That was next on my list. Now what a shame. The next one actually on my list.
How old is De Vrij?
He's like
getting on a bit.
33. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's not a starter for the Netherlands at this stage. Which
Average
is
age.
good. Like I don't think the Dutch would trade a starting center back for Ricardo Pepi, which is why I went further down the list. I think De Vrij is a very good player. So
and 33 is 25 in Serie A years, so it's not so bad.
yeah, he's basically a spring chicken.
Are you partnering De Vrij with Tim Ream just to annoy like half of the U.S. fan base?
Correct. Yeah. Sorry, Chris. You're on the bench for another grandpa. My next pick is I'm wondering if we could trade Yunus Musa and Joe Scally to Canada for Moise Bombito. I'm pretty sure they'd say no.
No, they're going to say no to this already.
Fine. They don't need Pepi, though, is the problem, because they have more
they've got
good
someone
strikers than the
better.
US too. All right, I'll take Bombito off the table. I only have two more. My other idea, from a macro sense, is to send a few players to a national team with a star player, like a national team that has a star, where that national team with the star would be better served having multiple quality international starters rather than just one star. And so the place I went first here is Uzbekistan, where they have Kusanov, the Man City center back. I'm wondering if we can trade, just in mass, Musa, Scally, and Cardoso. That's 3 starting players that would make Uzbekistan better for Kusanov. Just one player. That's one. And the other one is, Graham, this one's for you. Would Scotland take Yunus Musa and Ricardo Pepi, and you can even take one more dude of the dudes that I mentioned already. You can take Scally, you can take Cardoso for McSauce. Would that happen? No.
Untradeable. No, untradeable.
Now here, Graham,
we're done.
Here's my counterpoint to that.
Cold War.
There's this very promising, potentially world-class number 10 for the U.S. who is very
Kevin
good,
Sullivan.
very reliable, very injury-resistant, and totally chill. Gio Reyna for Scott McTominay? Let's make it happen.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, why not? We love chaos over here.
He seems like kind of like a doer personality, to quote your parlance. So, you throw that in. I think he's ready-made for Scotland. So let's just, we're going to stamp that one. It's all good. And we get Scott McTominay.
There was a whole Discord discussion about maybe getting Gio Reyna to Celtic. So maybe that's the starting point. We see how he gets on at Celtic, see how he gets on with the fried foods and the deep-fried Mars bars, and then we go
He's
from
too
there.
English for this. He's too English. Come on. Behave yourselves.
So is half our team. So is McTominay, born in Lancaster.
I truly do think he is the player I would want the U.S. to go for if this were ever possible, and I think he would have to do a very significant package, and even then I think it would be difficult. But he has the ability, he has the leadership, he has the grit, he has the intensity. I think he fits in and makes the U.S. team better right away. So anything we can do to get Scott McTominay, I'm sort of willing to do.
I mean, if we're being serious about this for a moment, do we have this power? Like, can we go to FIFA and, as I'm saying, be serious about this for a moment, as if it's an actual proposition? For Scotland, would surely need we need Pulisic and then a depth option for Scott McTominay. We're talking about someone who's just won the Player of the Year in Serie A. I've never had a player like this in our lifetime.
I would.
Gio Reyna was Bundesliga Player of the Year. So
don't fact check
forget
that, but it's true. Yeah. And that's interesting because McTominay was a player that kind of flew in the face of I'm not really looking for central midfielders, but I just thought it'd be funny to see if Graham would take anything. I would not ever trade Pulisic for Scott McTominay. The U.S. has 0 wingers and a bunch of central midfielders. I think McTominay might be the better player, but only marginally, and I'm not even really sure about that.
That's fair.
So I think we're destined not to make.
There's an impasse.
But that's the end of my list. I'm happy with the center backs I've added though. I think those are deals that actually could conceivably happen.
Okay.
I think Joe, I hadn't really thought about Johnny, and I think that would probably be the biggest like chip. Graham, what is his? Refresh my memory. What is the style that makes him so much better for Rabatis than maybe for the U.S. at times?
Doesn't have to do anything with the ball, can pass it on to people who can create and move with the ball further up the field. He's a destroyer in a double pivot for Betis.
Okay, so Johnny to Brazil, and we get Anthony?
Brazil would never take Johnny. Why?
He played there.
He played there, sure. That was the
fine.
problem with thinking about like the big nations, right? I'm wondering if Ryan's got an England-U.S. thing, but the U.S. just doesn't have a player that I think is really going to move the needle.
The one I kept trying to figure out was how do you get a striker from Brazil for Serginho Dest? Because I don't think that they have the best right back option. I forget who it is, but it's the starter from Monaco. I think he's like 24 years old. And I'm not sure that is like really moving the needle. I think Dest would do really well for Brazil. I just know that they're not giving up any of the primary attackers that you would really want, and that leaves like Richarlison and Anthony, and I'm not sure I'm giving up Serginho Dest for that.
Taylor, Casemiro, is Johnny better or worse at this stage of his career? Manchester United Casemiro, very different from Real Madrid Casemiro. Better or worse than Casemiro? I still think Casemiro's marginally better, but he's 33, so if we're talking about profile of player, he's the only kind of similar player in that Brazil pool.
God.
Maybe they would take it.
Poor Casemiro, man. Oh, I thought you were suggesting that swap, and it's like he goes from Real Madrid to Manchester United and Brazil to the U.S. national team.
I am suggesting that swap. So yeah, poor Casemiro indeed.
Wow. All right, who wants to hear my England-USA trade? Anybody?
Go for it.
Okay, so I think this one is probably weighted towards the US and shows my affinities for both nations. I am putting on the trade block for England Sir Harold Kane.
Wow. Okay.
I think that
the
he is a
whole
player-
country of the United States of America.
I think that he's a player quite often at major tournaments who doesn't show
can have
up
some
like
of it.
he should necessarily. I think we have.
Sorry, is this the guy who won the Golden Boot at a World Cup, like in 2018?
Hey, Ryan and I are both still seething from his lack of goals against Auckland City, Graham.
Yeah,
Let us have
yeah.
this moment, all right?
He's
Ryan,
lost me a big bet
trade
this
him.
summer. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's already got me down on funds this summer. I think the next. I mean, he's only 31 years old to be fair, Harry Kane. But I feel like we've got an Ollie Watkins, we've got an Ivan Toney. I'd have a Jude in a false nine potentially in this England team. What I think England lacks is that sort of number six. That defensive midfielder who can hold, who can cover
So
that.
Johnny.
not Johnny.
Deal. Take it, guys, quick.
I don't want like Declan Rice doing that kind of job. I think a lot of England's midfield is probably attack weighted. I want Tyler Adams for Harry
Yep.
Kane.
Done.
Yeah, that's
Done
right.
yesterday.
Is it that easy?
Done yesterday twice.
Does that?
Yeah.
I feel like that improves both teams, arguably.
I don't think that improves England, I'm afraid. I think England are so lucky to have Harry Kane, and when he does, and it might already be happening, but when he does come down the other side of the mountain and retires eventually, like, they're going to notice. Like,
Yeah, I think, Ryan, I'm actually sympathetic to your Tyler Adams could kind of help the England squad. I think that's a possibility. I just think Harry Kane is like one of the 10 best players in the world. So I will give you Tyler Adams, and I'll even throw in a Joe Scally for you, just out of the goodness of my heart.
so you're trying to get rid of Joe Scally.
Just
So
Tyler
bad.
Adams, please.
No, they come together.
Okay.
Like, it doesn't really apply because the U.S. automatically qualifies as host for this World Cup. But the idea of Harry Kane having to go play like away in Honduras, like that man is just going to either explode into flames or melt. I'm not sure which one it will be. Maybe both somehow. That would be worth it just for the lols. So yeah, let's make it happen. Johnny Cardoso for Harry Kane. Done.
No, well, yeah. I think the thing with Harry Kane is, like, in the qualifying groups, he can get 400 goals. But when he goes up against France and puts one over the bar, then that, it's a.
We don't have someone who can put the ball over the bar against France, so that's advancing the ball down the field for us, Ryan. We'll take that.
Fair.
I think his major tournament record is actually pretty good. I don't have it in front of me, but just off the top of my head, I think he's pretty prolific in World Cups and Euros. So yeah, hold on to him, Ryan, for as long as you can, I think.
Fine. Okay. Well, this is
Jamaica have not been particularly good at this Gold Cup so far, and maybe that's an understatement. Like, if they need defenders, could we package Joe Scally plus something for, say, Leon Bailey? Like, if the U.S. needs wingers, wide attackers, does that make a difference?
Hold on, I'll ask the shirt. It says yes.
Okay.
It says
Yeah.
yes.
Cool.
Sure,
All right.
Done.
All right. Joe Scally is Jamaican now. Done.
Congratulations.
All right.
Wait, Graham, do you have any trades?
Yeah, I've got an England-Scotland one for Ryan. So,
Oh.
Ryan, you've got the power. You're in charge of the FA. So, I would want Harvey Barnes, who the Scottish FA have tried to recruit for years at this point. There was a Time story before Euro 2020 that he had agreed to play for Scotland, but he was gaslighting us and that never materialised. And he's exactly the sort of player that we desperately need. We have the USA at the Gold Cup problem where we have no wingers. And the one winger that we do have, Ben Doak, came in and made an incredible impact in the Nations League and then Julie got injured for a long time. So we need someone like Harvey Barnes. I am willing to give, Ryan, England, Andy Robertson for Harvey Barnes, which I think is fair because Andy Robertson would still make the England squad right now. Maybe MLS starts ahead of him at this point, but position of weakness for England. Thank you, Joe, for the pirate sound effect. He would be a useful squad player. He's just been the starting left back for Liverpool, but he's for us. He's kind of coming down the other side of the mountain, and I think for us getting Harvey Barnes in, we can play Kieran Tierney at left back, who's back from injury for the next few weeks at least. I think that would be a good trade for all involved. So you take that one?
Do you though? Because I feel like I could hear the panic in your voice at the prospect of parting ways with Andy Robertson. I feel like you're okay
I'm
with
very
it,
comfortable
but also
with this.
not okay with it. All right.
So the secret here is Andy Robertson has never actually been that great for Scotland. Kieran Tierney's always been the more consistent left back. So for Scotland, that is. I'm happy with this. So, and Harvey Barnes hasn't even been called up by England yet. So it's like you're losing nothing to get Andy Robertson, but I feel like we're gaining a lot by getting Barnes.
My decision is no.
Oh, okay. Well, I tried.
Ryan, you as an England supporter, what would you give up for Jedi? On that same note,
I just recall him to his nation of birth and
Come home,
wouldn't
lad.
trade at all.
Come home.
it didn't really occur to me. I do hope he doesn't regret that choice in the long run.
Taylor, I'll give you Harvey Barnes. How's that?
You're giving the US Harvey Barnes. Harvey Barnes is really good, guys. Like honestly, it's a joke that England have got so much talent that he doesn't get a look in. But
Yeah, England does have a lot of talent.
I found overall, I thought this thought experiment was very fun, but not as fun as I thought it would be when I first started thinking about it. Because I think in the past, we have had enough depth in one or two positions that you could sort of find, like, somebody needs a goalkeeper. We've got 4 of them. Not really the case anymore. Or we've got enough, like, decent enough center backs. You could package 2 together to get an attacker. We just don't have nearly as much depth as I like to think we do, aside from maybe the midfield, to Joe's point. So I enjoyed this one and also found it to be little bit nerve-wracking at the same time.
who would you give Sweden for Victor Gyökeres? The logic here being they also have Alexander Isak, so they might be willing to part ways with one of those. And you don't need to worry about the rest of the Sweden team because they're rubbish, like the rest of their squad. So
Harry Kane.
you can package up some other players to get Gyökeres, who surely moves the needle for the US.
You have to give them like McKennie and Adams or like Pulisic and like multiple of the big guys, right? I mean, Gyökeres is a more effective player than anybody in the US squad. So I mean, you like Pepe. No, they wouldn't take Pepe. They didn't need him. But yeah, like multiple of the big guys, I think, right?
Yeah, Graham, I mean, like, I hear you. This is the problem that I kept running into is like, oh, Sweden, like, they're not that good. And then even if you're just going with, like, the club FC idea, there's, like, Atalanta, Benfica, Bologna, Dortmund, Salzburg, Brighton, Frankfurt. Like, you've got a lot of solid
but there's no,
players
like,
within there.
Samuel Dahl is decent, but the other players, I wouldn't say are standout players for the good clubs. I still think that midfield, for example, I think that you could transplant the entire US midfield into Sweden and they start. So, 2 of them for Gyökeres? Like McKennie.
Fine, they can have Luca De La Torre and they can have Seb Berhalter. We'll do the trade. We'll transport the entire midfield over there. It's fine.
All right.
Christian Roldan.
We'll give them Johnny and Yunus Musa for Dejan Kulusevski. How about that?
I forgot about Kulusevski. They're probably not trading him, actually.
Nah, they don't need him. He's just their vice captain. It's fine.
Bergvall, forgot about him as well. He's okay. They're not trading him. But the others, they can take their pick. From the
Why
US.
did you suggest this just to take it all away, Graham? What was the point?
No, I know. I apologise.
One more thought experiment on this question between the US and England. What about a managerial trade for born in the USA's Mauricio Pochettino versus England's proud and brave Thomas Tuchel?
Nay.
No.
No?
No.
No?
I mean, we are talking about a guy who's calling up Jordan Henderson in 2025, so... But then Miljevic, I guess.
I mean, yeah, there's some glass houses and some stones being thrown there, aren't there, Graham?
I mean, I think
Possibly.
largely it's just that I think Tuchel seems to be a more prickly individual, especially when it comes to Christian Pulisic, whom he has managed twice, and I don't think it worked out really in the long term either time. So I think maybe
it's working out so well with Poch.
Oh man, is he the problem?
Oh
no!
Wait a minute, is he the bad guy?
To paraphrase one of my favorite quotes ever from but also from Justified. If you run into a jerk in the morning, you run into a jerk. If you run into jerks all day, you're the jerk. And that's maybe a little bit concerning for me. Anyway.
There you go. Well, that Poch Pulisic scenario may lead to our next question we're going to get to after the break. That's from Kevin Tolley. That one was from Andrew. Thank you very much. Join us after the break. More USMNT chat and much more coming. Join us then. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to Listener Questions. Kevin Tolley's been in touch and says, if we assume that Pochettino needs to work with players in order to understand them and trust them to perform, which of the missing starters for the USMNT do you think Poch would most trust if given the time to work with them? And Kevin says he thinks he would most trust Tim Weah because how well he takes instruction and executes at a high level. Conversely, says Kevin, who do you think Pochettino would trust least? And thank you for all your hard work, etc. Lavished praise from Kevin. I think, Joe, it's difficult to assess who takes instruction the best because we don't really know who needs the most or least hand-holding because, we're not there every day, to be fair. But it's a very interesting thought experiment, this one.
Yeah, I'm totally guessing here based off of vibes, which is absolutely my bread and butter. So I'm glad you came to me first on this. It does seem like Pochettino trusts Tim Weah. He's worked with Tim Weah before. He's worked with most of the guys who are not here the summer before. We've already seen Pochettino tweak Tim Weah's role to a worse one, but it seems like he's trusted Tim Weah to adapt to that other spot over on the left side. Jedi seems pretty trustworthy, right? And that feels like something that makes sense about his character. To be entrusted with that nickname that he's bestowed upon himself and to not have it taken away, I think is pretty high level stuff. And also, Jedi's worked with Poch before. So, in terms of players that he trusts the least,
wait, Joe, can I jump into with two of those? Because I agree on Jedi for sure, and then I think Weah would be top of my list. I think that's a really great shout by both you and Kevin because I've mentioned this many times in the past. That was the thing that Greg Berhalter talked a lot about with Tim Weah, how Weah requested additional film sessions. Maybe Pochettino isn't going to do those. But he wanted to learn more about what the specific requirements were, what he wasn't doing, what he could improve upon, and that's how he became such a reliable starter for the U.S. So I think he comes in with that same sincerity and dedication, plus the lack of wing options, and I think Pochettino trusts him. I think Jedi, for the work ethic, for how hard he plays, but how solid he is, I think is definitely on that list. I have one who straddles between, but I will pause on that one to go back to you for trust the least.
All right, now I'm intrigued. As far as trust the least, I don't know if Gio fits into the category of missing starter, but it seems like he doesn't trust Gio Reyna to play minutes about as far as he can throw Gio Reyna. Poch is getting up there a little bit. I know he's still playing some soccer head tennis, whatever that ping pong table tennis game is called.
Oh, I saw that.
But he's got some spryness still in his Argentine step. But I don't think he's chucking Gio Reyna very far. So he's on my list.
It's insane.
Joe Scalli's on my list.
Fallen. I'm sorry. It is crazy how far Gio Reyna has fallen in our rankings and estimations. That even in the we are trading assets thing, we didn't even try to move him really. And now here we are being he's not really a starter. Probably doesn't get much trust. It's a weird trajectory for his career.
There's this quote from Justified I like, Taylor. Please.
Yeah, please.
Gio, if Gio Reyna ever gets healthy again, I will reclaim all of my stock on him. I am still hoovering it up in the corner. He is the best soccer player that the U.S. has produced in so long, and it is just such a shame that all of the other things have
the low bar.
Not worked out. It's not that low. It's low, but it's not
I know.
Yeah, I think Gio Reyna is a great player, but it seems like Poch doesn't trust him as far as he can throw him. Joe Scally, because he and Gio are buds. I don't know. Feels right. Also, he was dropped, so I don't know that there's a lot of trust there. And then just on a pure vibes notion, but also maybe not quite pure vibes, Serginho Dest and Weston McKennie have questionable trustfulness. I could see them not having any issues in this category at all. But if I need a favor from somebody, or I've got a flat tire or something, and I need help. I don't know, whatever the situation. I'm stranded somewhere. That's probably not my first call to Serginho Dest, and it's probably not my second call to Weston McKennie. So that's kind of how I thought about this. Maybe that's unfair. I'm not trying to disparage anybody here, but the vibes are there.
It's like you call Dest with a flat tire. in the middle of the desert, and he shows up like 3 days later with a Slurpee and no tire changing equipment at all. Like, yeah, I agree with you, Joe. And I think even if Dest is like the first player I drafted when we did our USMNT draft, and I think he is so important to this team, I think from the standpoint of if Pochettino wants his team to be able to play a very like structured way at times, if you have to defend and kind of have the same baseline, I think Dest is the one who I think is most likely to go for a little bit of a wander and maybe be caught out and not have the positioning locked down the way Pochettino might want. So I think you could see just that little bit of concern from the trustfulness standpoint. McKennie was the one that I think straddles between the two because he can be erratic with his first touch. Sometimes he goes missing for stretches of games. Sometimes maybe he gets into the physicality too much on occasion. But at the same time, he seems to have either the personality or the disposition or the work rate or maybe all three that he keeps finding his way back into managers' good graces, specifically at club level. But he kind of always finds a way to stick around and improve his standing to the point where he ends up regularly starting. So he seems to have some quality that I think always brings him back into the managerial trust. So I think in the end, McKennie is on the good list instead of the not trusted list. But I think he's the one in between for me.
All I can think about now is who's the most trusted player to change your tyre. Is it Tim Ream?
Tim Ream, it's
I
Ream.
picture Tim Ream with the oily rag over his shoulder, sort of wiping his hands, going, "You're welcome, sir."
Yeah, he's got mechanic vibes.
Here's my only concern: he spent a lot of time in England. Is he driving a lot? Is he changing tires there? I feel like Walker Zimmerman can change a tire.
Yeah, he can. Yep, Taylor's right. I was wrong before. Yeah, that's the correct answer.
Just for record, Graham, do we use tyres in England as well? Just checking.
You use rubbery roundies, I thought is what you called them.
Rubbery
roundies?
roundies, yeah. Roundy roundy.
All right.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm showing my bias here in the striker depth rankings. Does Balogun come into the conversation for trust the least for anybody? Let's have voice. Hi,
Has he been in a squad yet? Like I don't even know. There's been no interaction between Poch and Balogun, so I don't even know how to judge that one. But
yeah. Taylor, 4 words. How dare you?
Did you leave off an F word in there?
Yeah, don't count those. Don't count it.
Yeah. There we go. All right, I think I want to wrap up this question right there. Kevin Tolley, thank you very much indeed. Mark Bauer has been in touch with this one on our Discord. It seems something's more wrong with the USMNT than just we've got bad players. What is it? We've always had lesser players, always had pay to play, never had pro rel. We've had good managers and bad ones, yet it seems like we're struggling more now than we ever have before. Mark says, "Splain," which in audio form is explain. Graham, you've exhaled as if you want to explain the whole scenario here in great detail.
Yeah. Are we doing a full series on this? How long have I got? Like 5 minutes to try and answer this question. Yeah, I don't know how good a job I'm gonna do there, but I've got a couple theories to start us off, at least. So the first one is about the spread of talent within the squad, because it is true, as Mark says, that the US have talented players. And I'm sure I've made this point before on this show, but with the US, it seems to me anyway that it's sort of distributed in a weird way. It's uneven. So they've got good fullbacks, not a huge amount in the central defence, a good bunch of midfielders as well, but the balance is a bit weird even within that midfield unit. They've got Pulisic, but then not a top-level centre forward. So for me, I think of like the spine of a team. And by spine, I'm talking about goalkeeper, central defence, central midfield, centre forward. And I think at international level, if you have 2 or 3 of those things, you've got a better chance, just because, as we keep talking about on the show, you don't have the time on the training pitch to work on intricacies and sequences and so on. And so you're kind of relying on the talent of the players. And if you have that talent in key positions, you've got a better chance. So if I compare, this is a bit of a weird comparison, but I'm thinking back to last year when I previewed Slovenia for the Euros. And they are a super mid-team talent-wise. But they've got a top-level goalkeeper, Jan Oblak, and they've got a top-level centre forward, Benjamin Sesko. Both of those players had a good tournament. Slovenia made it out of a really difficult group, and they took Portugal to penalties in the last 16. So they had a better, they overachieved relative to the overall talent of their squad. I think another comparison, more to do with the talent, the spread of talent, is Canada, right? So I wouldn't say Canada, you might not like this one, listeners, but I wouldn't say Canada have a better squad in terms of talent. But their best players are a central defender, 2 central midfielders, a fullback who is really a winger for Canada at least, and a centre forward, and I feel much better about their spread of talent and actually being able to like build a functional team out of how that talent is spread around than the US. So that's one of my theories. The second theory, I'll try and keep this a little bit shorter, it's just the vibes are on the floor. And have been since 2022, and I can't totally explain why that is the case. Did it start during the Reina scandal? Was it due to the Berhalter process? I can't explain that because I'm not in the environment. But everyone associated with this team takes every opportunity that they are given to bring up culture. That's the word that they keep using, quote, culture. So if we break down what that means, what does culture mean in that context? It means the environment within the team isn't right, they're not pushing each other on, the hunger isn't there. And that has come across on the pitch, where there's been a lifelessness about the US since the last World Cup. So maybe the World Cup and just the competitiveness of a home World Cup snaps things back into place. I find it difficult to explain why that is the case with the vibes. I can't really quantify it in a pure sense. But we can't ignore what people within the camp keep saying. At every single camp it gets brought up. Pochettino brings it up. I think there was an interview with Tyler Adams fairly recently when he brought up the culture. I'll never forget when Pochettino was appointed after the September camp before he'd actually come in. And Pulisic is talking on the pitch about Pulisic coming in. What's the number one thing that he has to fix in this team? Culture was the first thing that he mentioned. So the people that are within that environment are telling us that the vibes within the camp are bad. And I do think that has some form of impact on what we're seeing on the pitch.
Taylor, anything to add there?
Yeah, a few things. I think Graham has laid out some key points well. My thesis would be that the U.S. is in the midst of an identity crisis and that we've reached a new level in terms of talent and profile, largely from a club FC standpoint where these players play oftentimes is like more high profile than it's been, but not at the level, to Graham's point, where we have the depth to compete with stronger nations while trying to play their game. I think at the same time, we've also reached a point where the enthusiasm for the approach of the past is not still there. The analogy I kept trying to come up with, and I went with like a construction worker, maybe it's like a chef just starting out, maybe it's like a greenhorn on a crabbing boat. We all watch Deadliest Catch, right? But like if you start off in a sort of like hard, like a position that requires a ton of hard work, you've got to be there every single day, you've got to grind to get the job done, you do your job. But then let's say you go to college, you get like a middle management position, and now you're in the air conditioned room, but occasionally you're asked to go back out and work on the site. Are you going to be as motivated? Are you going to be as enthusiastic? Are you going to be as happy to be there doing the kind of grinding that you used to have to do? I think some of the players coming back to the U.S. don't really have that appetite that maybe players of the past did, which isn't meant to be a like kids these days don't know how to work. It's just more that the kids of this team have more opportunity, more profile, more money than ever before, and you are sort of asking more of them to come back from club situations in which they're playing in front of 60, 70, 80,000 people every single weekend to play, friendlies or Nations League games or World Cup qualifiers in places where you're getting a hostile reception. There aren't as many fans. There aren't as many amenities. And I just think it's a weird point in the U.S. identity. I think the drop-off in depth is also really important to note because I've mentioned this before. I don't think it's as easy to have a unified style as it once was, where maybe, like looking at Canada that Graham outlined for a moment, you have these very high-profile or certain high-profile individuals who can elevate the team, but you have... It gets used like in a pejorative way, but like a lot of water carriers as well, like people who will do the hard work, the hard running, who will kind of be your gritty spine that allows your individual difference makers to make that difference. I think with the U.S., we have a lot of different players playing in a lot of different leagues, and so you don't have as many sort of like unified approaches. You don't have a lot of players playing one stylistic way. And you don't have the depth that allows you to call in more of those players so that you can have one unified approach. So I think you end up with guys coming back who maybe aren't as motivated to do the hard work at national team level that maybe they would have been in the past when the national team was the highest kind of point they could reach in their career, the highest profile they were going to get. And I think it just creates a scenario in which you have guys who are having a harder time kind of putting in that effort, but maybe also because you have different tactical philosophies that have to be put to the side because you're being asked to do something different. So I think those are maybe more like nuanced, maybe like emotional answers. But I think the final thing for me, and I'll probably make a few more points on this one, is to Graham's point, I think morale is really low. And I think in the past, you had dual nationals coming in to a kind of an established locker room with an established identity. And it was talked about with Jurgen Klinsmann that when there started to be more German-speaking players coming in, you had this kind of German clique that had its own identity, and you started to get fractures in the locker room that never existed before. And I don't think it's just dual nationals, don't understand what it is to be American or whatever it is Bruce Arena said in the past, to take him very much out of context and paraphrase what he said. But I think it can be that if you don't have an established identity or an established locker room philosophy and morale, it just kind of becomes whatever's coming in. And so I don't think you have as many players who are leading the way as you did in the past. It's why I think the team is better when Tyler Adams is able to play, because I think he is one that you're never going to doubt his commitment and effort, and I think he leads by example. And very last little thing is just to Graham's morale point. I also personally think it's probably harder for people playing abroad and having a lot of international connections to be like, yay, America right now. And I do think that is something that I think in the past, maybe it was easier to represent the U.S. Maybe there have been times in the past when it was perceived as being cooler or perceived as being a stronger thing. And I think maybe national pride for some players is maybe a little bit lower. And so you also have that coming into it. It's just, I think it's a low morale point at a time when the U.S. is in the midst of an identity crisis. I think those two things blend together to make a difficult situation.
Yeah, and the thing that you talk about, Taylor, with the camp being a healthy one at the last World Cup, that's really confusing to me, because it might well be the case that there are cliques with dual nationals now, but since the last World Cup, the only dual national who's come in is Balogun, unless I'm forgetting another, certainly high profile one.
Yeah.
So what's changed? Because it used to be the case that the culture was one of the things that the US had before that World Cup, where people would, countless dual nationals would come into camp and they would choose to play for the US because they felt so enthused by the culture. So what's changed in that regard? That's confusing.
So I think it was probably a gradual change, and one that I personally was really slow to recognize, because I long felt like, no, you bring Berhalter back. The whole squad is bought in. Everybody wants him back. Your key players are saying, yeah, he's the guy we want back. And we kind of know now that part of why they wanted him back is because he was pretty lax, and he let players go out to dinner and go golfing and see their families and have families in the hotel. And I think there was a hey, we're all just hanging out, having a good time, and then we play some soccer. That is an oversimplification, but I think in the past, it was like you were coming in to represent your country, to be with this group of guys that you've played with a bunch at different levels at different points in your career, and we're all sort of working together and becoming this sort of hardened team, chip on the shoulder, us against the world. I don't think you had that mentality as Berhalter, maybe going into that World Cup and then coming out of that World Cup and in Berhalter's second stint. So I think he is part of it there, that I think the culture got a little too lax, and it's something that Pochettino, I think, is trying to wrest control of and bring back.
I think a lot of the points that have been made I totally agree with, and yet somehow I'm still going to disagree with the premise of the question. Mark talks about in the question, it seems like we're struggling more now than we ever have. That's just wrong, right? That's just objectively incorrect, right? I understand that this is a low-ish point in this particular World Cup cycle. Kuva was the low point. And there is no point that comes close to that. We're not even remotely near that low. We are so far away from that. Getting grouped at the Copa America, that's bad. It was nowhere near as bad as missing the World Cup. The U.S. is clearly in a better place now than it was a decade ago. That is just the reality. The reality also for the U.S. is that I know this is flying in the face of the question that Mark asked, and I'm glad that you guys gave more nuanced answers. But the reality is for the U.S. that they've never had a whole slew of great players. That they don't now, they never have before. That is why the U.S. has been grouped at the World Cup or not made the World Cup just as many times as they've made it out of the group at the World Cup since 1990 when they started being back at World Cups. I think all of the U.S.'s struggles, and you guys have done a good job of parsing why this team is maybe not quite as good as we thought it could be, and that I'm not taking umbrage with that at all. I think that's a fair point. But the reality is this U.S. team is pretty much congruent with U.S. teams of the past. And with all of those factors that Mark lists in the question more or less being the same as they've been for a long time, that doesn't really surprise me. And I think all of the lows, the relative lows in the last, 3 years or whatever it's been now, all fit very much within the natural kind of ebbs and flows of a team that is like solid and can compete in games against good teams, but will not be favored in those games against good teams for a really long time.
Joe, one quick counterpoint / point of clarification. I agree with you that Kuva is the lowest point I have ever experienced rooting for the U.S. national team. The argument I see bandied about quite a bit is the U.S. is very fortunate it doesn't have to qualify for this coming World Cup. If it did, they would be in a much more precarious position. Do you buy into that, or do you feel like they would be fine, generally speaking, in World Cup qualifying, especially, I should add, expanded World Cup qualifying in CONCACAF?
Yeah.
Because Gold Cup has shown U.S. can handle some CONCACAF opposition at the same time. Nations League showed Panama and Canada can be too much for the U.S. on their day.
Yeah, I think the U.S. would not be without its low points in World Cup qualifying, as there always are for the U.S., right? I mean, it's difficult to go on the road and win some of these games. The U.S. would be fine. In expanded qualifying, I can't remember how many spots CONCACAF is getting. Is it like 6.5 or something like that?
Yeah, something like that.
There is just no reality in which the U.S. is the 7th best team in CONCACAF. We just don't live in that world. They will be fine. So again, like I'm not trying to say, and maybe I came in too strong with like I disagree with the premise of the question. Although I think I do disagree with that. I don't believe this, but I do think that you all have been fair to parse out some of the reasons why the U.S. maybe haven't progressed. I mean, for me, the big reason why the U.S. haven't progressed since 2022, first and foremost, is that none of the players have improved. Right? Like I say this all the time, but there are two ways to get better as a national team. One is for existing players to get better, and the other is to get more players that are also better and can improve your team. And that just hasn't happened. Like Balogun's been involved. I think he's a good addition to this team. He's not played basically at all. You've lost Gio Reyna effectively. You haven't seen McKennie or Musa or Pulisic or you haven't seen any of these guys like really take the next step in their career. Maybe with a couple of exceptions. So yeah, for me, it just isn't a big surprise that this team doesn't look like world beaters. And it is completely congruent with the U.S. for the last 3 decades now.
I am not surprised that the US hasn't progressed since the last World Cup because of what you just said, Joe. Like none of the players have. Maybe Pulisic has actually in terms of his club situation. There's a couple of exceptions there, but broadly speaking, I agree with that. Where I think people are right to be panicked about this team is it feels like the regression on the national team level has outpaced the stagnation at club level of these players, if that makes any sense. Where this team is in a worse place now than they were coming out of the 2022 World Cup. Like they sacked the manager because of it. I don't think that's it in any doubt, despite the fact we haven't really got much competitive evidence between that last World Cup and now. But I think it's a perception thing where everyone talked about, or maybe not everyone, but a lot of people talked about a golden generation and this team was going to be different. So even if this is on a par with what we've seen from previous US generations, it feels worse because the expectation was higher. And maybe we were all naive for that, but it was higher.
I think the feels worse part is also critical from the fan perspective, because I think after the World Cup, you had a sizable contingent of U.S. supporters who felt like Berhalter was holding this team back. And maybe he was in certain ways, maybe he wasn't as much in others. But at the very least, you had a person that a lot of fans could point to as being the problem. And now you have Mauricio Pochettino in there. There are plenty who are still pointing the finger at him. But I think it's harder to find the one thing that you can point to as being the problem. And so it just creates a feeling of, I think to the point of this question, what's wrong with this team? Why aren't they better? What's going on here? As soon as you think it's one player, that player like isn't there and the team is still bad, or like one key player who then underperforms. Like I think it's just the explanations are myriad and convoluted. Ultimately, I think the vibes around this team and the experience of viewing them is pretty low. Maybe not all time historically low, but still pretty low, even if the players are playing in higher quality leagues with better teams.
Yeah, the vibes thing I think is quite important, Taylor, because they're reflected in the sentiment towards this team from fans, because whether this is an Nadir or not, they're playing in front of half-empty stadiums at the moment, right? And that speaks volumes, doesn't it?
I mean, it speaks volumes about the way U.S. soccer and in the Gold Cup, CONCACAF sets ticket prices. I think that is ultimately the biggest issue on that front. If you had tickets priced at $20 and $30, I think you'd get more people going to games and excited to watch this team, even if they were poor. When you're pricing them at $180 for like upper deck seats for a team that doesn't have many of the marquee names, I think there's going to be even more malaise than there already was.
Yes. Well, thankfully, I'm sure tickets across the board will all come down and prices everywhere will be.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Anyway, Mark Bauer, thank you very much indeed for that question. Excellent as it was. One more quick break. When we come back, we're putting Southampton in Serie A. Join us then. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to our listener questions. One more for you here from Aberdeenio. One of yours, Graham, perhaps. Southampton could have realistically finished top 10 if they were in Serie A this past season. I don't think a single team outside the top 9 is better than them, except maybe Como. I'm saying this, says Aberdeenio, after watching one Serie A game all season, in which Cagliari looked like a bunch of podcasters playing against Napoli.
Hey now.
Rude.
Come on.
Hey now.
Am I crazy? Says Aberdeenio. Now, Graham, Aberdeenio, I think there is talking about the game where Napoli won the league at home with a spectacular source appearance, if I'm not mistaken, for that Cagliari game. And just taking them as an example. So Cagliari drew against Juve, Inter, Milan, Napoli, and Roma this season. They beat Atalanta. So, like, They are a quality team who can beat top half opposition. Are Southampton a quality team who could beat that caliber of opposition in Serie A? I think I don't agree reasonably strongly with what Aberdeenio is saying here.
Yeah, my answer is no. I don't think they would finish in the top 10. I sort of agree with the premise of the question in that the worst Premier League teams would obviously fare much better in the other Big Five leagues. And if you had maybe given me even an Ipswich, I know Leicester end up actually finishing above Ipswich, which was a weird quirk of the season, but Ipswich were the best of the three teams that went down in the Premier League last season. Like, Ipswich would maybe, in my eyes, be closer to that sort of mid-table mark in Serie A. But I think what's been underplayed here is just how bad Southampton were last season. We are talking about an historically bad Premier League team, a team that very nearly had the worst ever points tally in Premier League history. And I looked through their team, and for me, and look, you look through Cagliari and I look through Torino, and it's not like they've got world-class players that are jumping off the page there, I accept that point. But equally, I look through Southampton, and I think they've got like 3, possibly 4 players who are kind of worth anything in a Big Five league sense. And then I look at the top 10 in Serie A last season. It's Napoli, Inter, Atalanta, Juve, Roma, Fiorentina, Lazio, Milan, Bologna, and Como. That's the top 10. Aberdeenio is saying that they could realistically finish in the top 10. Who are they finishing above? Because like Bologna won the Coppa Italia and were playing in the Champions League last season, and Como were on fire towards the end of the season and have some serious talent and a top young manager. So yeah, Southampton probably would finish higher, but I'm kind of placing them. I think their ceiling is definitely like 14th. I don't think they're finishing any higher than that.
It's interesting, Graham. I was curious what your sort of like personal viewpoint would be on this, because you've watched more of Southampton than me and more of Serie A than me, both all time and in this last 12 months. I went through and looked at 3 different data sources to figure out a rough answer to this question. And they basically agree with what you just said, more or less. The first one I looked at, and whenever we get a this club would finish in this place in this league question, I go to the Opta club rankings. So Opta's power rankings, every soccer team on the planet basically, has Southampton as the 15th best team in Serie A, should they join the league, which is effectively what you just said. You're talking about 14th, 15th, right in that range. I think that's probably about right, where they would avoid relegation, maybe even quite comfortably, because of the spend and the talent that they do have, and the fact that they get to pick off points against other teams that would certainly get relegated in England. I think that feels right. There are 2 other, though, estimators that feel better about Southampton's odds. The first is FBref and their wages data, which is estimated, so grains of salt. But they had Southampton as the 7th highest spender based on wages in Serie A at 65 million euros a year, We do know that in European soccer, wages, like salary spend, is a pretty strong correlator for success. I think that does paint a picture that maybe Southampton would do a bit better than we think they would, and England is just really, really hard. The other one is Transfermarkt, which, again, grains of salt, but maybe used in a macro sense, is like kind of maybe a little useful at times. Transfermarkt has them 10th in Serie A in squad value, should they join the Italian top flight. I don't know exactly where you want to fall in that. We are certainly looking at Mid-table, if you average it out, you're looking at just below mid-table. And to me, that probably feels about right.
Yeah, I trust the Opta ranking there, Joe, much more than the other two, just because I think you can kind of explain away the other two. So the wages thing, I think that is some championship inflation going on there, where Southampton, in an attempt to... And also the fact that you've got probably some legacy Premier League spend where they've come up and down, and so there's probably some players in there that are earning what they shouldn't be earning for their contribution to that squad. And in terms of the value of the squad, right? That was the other metric from Transfermarkt. I would hazard a guess that is largely because the 3 or 4 players that I mentioned as having some worth in this team are guys like Aaron Ramsdale or Taylor Harwood-Bellis or what's the tricky winger who's been linked with Tottenham, whose name escapes me, who apparently Southampton want £100 million for. Good luck on that, by the way. But they're probably going to sell him one day for like $50 million. Not Matt Letizia. I've forgotten his name. I can't quite remember. He was relatively decent last season. Young kid, dribbly winger. He'll go for like 40, 50 million. So I think that probably explains why their squad value. The rest of their team is absolute garbage, like in the Premier League sense. And we saw that last season. We got the evidence of a 38-game season where they finished with 12 points or something. So yeah, I feel pretty good about placing them like 14th, 15th in Serie A.
Okay. Taylor, any more to add on this one?
I think the interesting thing would be if you gave them like time to prepare to be in Serie A. I think they would probably actually do better than Graham is giving them credit for, just because they do have so much more financial power. They're able to spend so much more. I found a lot of those same numbers that Joe was kind of rolling through. I think the issue would be that even with the superiority of their spend, that existing team right now is kind of built to survive in the Premier League. And I think when you move them to Serie A, do they have to change the philosophy and style? Do they have to change the approach? Are they going to have more of the ball than maybe they would in the Premier League? Are they going to have more time on the ball than they would in the Premier League? And I think that's where their present setup again might not put them into the best situation. But I think if they were able to spend to be in Serie A and plan to be in Serie A, I think that they are probably able to, with that kind of financial might coming from the Premier League, be able to be more competitive than they would be in other leagues.
Yeah, Tyler Dibbling. Dribbling. That's how I'm going to remember it from now on. That's his name.
There you go. Always good to have a device like that. Just imagine how much better the food will be at St Mary's if they join Serie A. Just imagine.
Oh,
exactly.
Spectacular. I saw that there's a Kevin De Bruyne themed gelato in Naples already.
Kevin De Bruyne?
Kevin De Bruyne, yeah.
That's the one.
You've seen it as well.
I've seen it as well. Yep, there we go. Aberdeenio, thank you very much indeed for your question. Thank you to everybody who's filed a question with us for this episode. If you would like to do so, totalsoccershow.com/questions, or you can join our Discord. Patreon.com/totalsoccershow is the way to do so. A please and a thank you. But for now, Taylor Rocco, thank you very much indeed for your answering of questions.
Thank you very much, my friend. I wish the Kevin De Bruyne ice cream were vanilla and peach, so it would be as pale as he is at times, but then as bright pink as he is at times.
Can an ice cream get sunburned?
Fried ice cream.
Yeah.
Wow. There we go. I think, don't the Neapolitans fry ice cream? I feel like
they
that's
do
something
indeed.
They do. Yeah.
Them and the Scots.
Yeah.
The good
for
guys.
them. Good stuff. Graham Ruthven, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Ryan Bailey.
Joe Lowry, pleasure as always, my good man.
Pleasure was all mine, Ryan. I'll wait for Harry Kane to arrive in a nice, neat little package on my front lawn.
Yeah, there we go. We're gonna drop him with a drone with Prime. He's coming soon for you, Joe. Good stuff. Thank you very much, listener, for joining us on this one. We'll be back on the feed very shortly, but for now, bye.